Can we get going? Yep. We have team 4. All right, so I am Micah Day. I'm part of team 4, and these are my colleagues, Ryan, Jessica, Aaron, and Terry. I'd like to start this off a little differently. I'd like to share a personal video of my son. His name is Max, and he just returned home from school. This is his first day of school last fall.
How was your first day of school? Hey, did you have a good day? Good first day? Yeah?
How the first day of my school.
You did? No way. Who's your teacher this year? Did you have a good day?
So this is Max. He is one of the 3.5 million individuals in the United States that's been diagnosed with autism. We had him diagnosed when he was about 3 years old. And since that time, we've been through hundreds of therapists and professionals and just all kinds of folks. And as you can see, he severely struggles with communicating with us. So imagine sending your child to school. You kind of have no idea what's happening there. Maybe you know a little bit about what he's doing, but you don't know who he's playing with, what he's working on, and generally if he enjoys it. So your kid comes home from school, like Max, and he can't share that with you. He can't communicate that. He wants to, you can tell, but he really struggles with that, right? So when we first sent Max to school, a few years ago, this has just been a nagging and emotional issue for our family. It's been a problem that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. Really all we want is to genuinely understand what he's going through at school, what he's doing, what kind of things he's working on. So this is what we get from school right now. We had to coerce the school just to get this information. I should also say that we prepared this ourselves, so it's not like a standard template that they would send out. Teachers don't really have the time to print something like this off, let alone fill in the information or fill in anything substantive that would be of use for a parent. And if you think about most parents across the United States, they probably don't even have the knowledge or resources to understand that they could do a template like this, but they probably don't know to ask the schools. So this is what I like to call Max's organizational chart, or his list of stakeholders. These are the folks that Max works with on either a daily basis or work with regularly. And on the right-hand side there, those are generally kind of the educators, so we're going to focus on that side. If I want to get information from these educators or his stakeholders, I have to call what's called an IEP meeting. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's an individualized education plan, generally for students that have some sort of special need or have maybe behavior challenges. So I call the meeting, and these happen maybe once a year. Well, they're required by law to happen once a year. Sometimes that's all we get. And this is how many people could be sitting at the table. Sometimes it's more than 10 people. It's absolutely insane. And if you think about the communication flow that's happening between these folks, both to prepare for the meeting, but also to track his IEP or track his progress against his IEP, it looks like this. It's an absolute nightmare, it's a mess. So we're walking around with a piece of paper basically to try to prepare for a meeting with 10 plus stakeholders that may or may not have all the information they need. And then there's the communication aspect of this as well, right? Or the scheduling aspect of this as well, right? So we have to schedule all of these stakeholders. Maybe it's someone from the district or the special education teacher. We're trying to wrangle all these stakeholders into one meeting. And if you think about how many cases a teacher might have, they could have up to 60 cases in DPS, for example, Denver Public Schools. So again, this is what we're working with. This is our tool right now. It just doesn't work. If you're a professional and you're preparing for a meeting with 10 plus stakeholders, how do you get the information you need to look professional? Sure, some teachers or professionals might have a binder, but really, come on. So this is what we want to do. We want to create a app-based communication tool to support any professional who are working with children on the spectrum from a professional standpoint. So this is our app, or this is our tool. It's pretty basic, as you can see. This is a typical classroom. So maybe there are 5 students. They could be spread across different classrooms, or perhaps they're in one central classroom, but pretty easy to customize, right? So we're grouping, the application into core functions. So we have behaviors, academics, feelings, and then reports and communications. And all of the basic functions are rolling up into reports and communications. So let's say we want to track a behavior. Maybe Max is having a tough day at school. He's showing kind of verbal, verbal issues. So really simple, click on it. We can click the severity. We can perhaps add more to this. Click the time, add it, and there's a piece of data. So then for the academics section, this will be individualized for each student to track against their IEP. And then the feelings section we're really excited about, and we think that this will address not only the needs of us as parents, but a lot of folks who have kids who their child can't communicate that well. So over time, we'll hand the iPad or the phone with the app on this, and Max might be able to click on how he's feeling. Maybe he's happy, maybe he's indifferent, maybe he's not happy at all. And over time, we can look at his progress. Maybe there's something happening outside of school that we don't know about. Or maybe there's something happening inside school that we should know about, but the school's not telling us. And like I said, all of those functions are rolling up into the reports and the communications. So we'll be able to share these reports with any of the stakeholders, any of Max's stakeholders who need it. And the nice thing about this is we can set it to, set the communication style to the parents or the stakeholders' needs. So again, for Max, like I might want to get something every single day. Some parents might want to get something once a week, some might, maybe every 6 months. But at the end of the day, it'll be customizable and I'll be able to choose as a parent how many times I'm getting updated. And then like I mentioned above, there's also a scheduling portion of this. It's a nightmare for the professionals or the educators to schedule these meetings, and the communication flow is crazy. So we'll be able to do that from here pretty seamlessly. Perfect. Great. So that's a little bit about our application and our solution. Let's talk about how we envision the organization being set up. So we will incorporate as a nonprofit, and our mission or our goal really is to be the communication tool for the Maxes of the world and for their families. But not just for the families like Max's who have the resources and the tools and the schools that have the capability to deploy this kind of solution. We also want to focus on the large portion of schools that are underfunded or the low-income families. We really want to work on that, and we believe that that will be a strong part of our mission. At the outset, we'll rely primarily on funding from donors. Generally, those are private donors who are high net worth individuals, and they'll be connected to this mission in a way. So maybe they have children who are autistic or grandchildren who are on the spectrum. And again, at the outset, we'll need to develop partnerships with research institutions that are either doing this work or want to do this work. And that will be absolutely key and important in getting the application right, making sure that the back end, the data tracking and how we're tracking behaviors, we have to make sure we get that right to deploy the solution and have a strong chance of this working. What's not on here is our recognition that there are a lot of HIPAA laws and compliance and regulations that we will have to deal with. And so again, at the outset, we want to make sure that we're working with institutions or at least organizations that can help us navigate these crazy waters. It's really complex, and so making sure we bake that into the application at the outset is going to be key. So let's talk a little bit about the education market in the U.S. So right now, there are 98,000 public schools. There's 33,000 private schools and 51 million students in the United States. On the special education side, there are 6.6 million students, and of those, about 580,000 are autistic. And something else that is not here on the slide, but again, tied back into our core mission is really underfunded schools or children who are low income or come from families of low income. So just under 50% of students right now in the United States receive some sort of reduced price lunch or free lunches. So we made the assumption that, of course, not all of those are going to low income or underfunded schools, but a good portion of them will be. And so taking that back to the numbers of children who are potentially autistic and attending those schools, that's about 200 to 250,000 students that probably wouldn't have access to this kind of school, tool. So again, that's really important for us, and part of our mission is to make sure that we can get this, across the board. So in looking at our competitors, the competitive landscape, it's definitely a competitive space. It's crowded. But what we quickly realized is the competition is mainly in the general education space. So we consider ourselves to sit right in between kind of a learning management and a learning analytics tool. Combined with both of those, will first and foremost be a communication tool focused on the narrow niche of providing our solution to autistic children, and we will be the first mover with this solution. Oh, sorry, going back. One more thing is the other piece is we're going to be a nonprofit organization, and so through that we believe we can keep our costs low, and therefore we'll be able to deploy our solution to more of a portion of the United States. And then in thinking about how we deploy this, how do we get this off the ground? So we're anticipating 3 phases. So the first phase will be, 6 months up to a year. We'll be doing initial fundraising, and that will continue, of course, throughout all of these phases. We'll identify key partners or key institutions and stakeholders, and then the research and product development begins. Phase 2 will start around year 2019 through 2020. We'll be doing beta testing, identifying pilot schools, proof of concept, and then at the end of this phase, we're looking at, okay, we need to hire a sales team, and how are we thinking about this initial product launch? And then phase 3, that's where the rubber meets the road, year 2021 and beyond. Fully deployed, and we'll be hiring as needed to support the program. So that's it. We genuinely appreciate your willingness to listen to what is a very emotional journey for a lot of families here in the United States. We will have some time for questions at the end, of course, but we have 2 asks. So the first is, of course, we're looking for donors. Again, we're anticipating a cost of about $1 million to get this off the ground and to get us through phase 2. The second, and just as important, are connections. We realize the magnitude and the audacity of what we're trying to do here. It's a big problem, and it's going to require a very strong network of experts from across many different fields. And so what we'd like from you is, if you're willing, and if you know people, we'd like to be connected. Or maybe you just know someone who knows someone. We'll take anything at this point. And bringing it back to this, and to why we're talking about this in the first place, what we want to do is really improve the life of the Maxes across the world. So thank you, and let us know if you have any questions.
Have you started talking to organizations yet?
What kind of organizations?
Anybody that you would partner with, or?
Yeah, so, my world's a little more micro, but for sure we started talking to our schools. I've started talking to Max's therapists, done some research around who are the players in the behavioral space, and then, initially or cursory looked at some research institutions. But in terms of specific people, the answer is no.
Okay, well, Easter Seals St. Louis, from what I understand, is a very unique autistic organization in the country.
Really?
So yeah.
Okay.
It started out as Judavine, then it became a series of different things, and now they've just rebranded as Easter Seals St. Louis. It's pretty much, it's not all autism, but it's largely autism. Yeah. And then an organization called Great Circle here in St. Louis has an autism school.
Okay.
So,
Awesome.
So I'm happy to
Yeah,
give you
of course.
some context if you need them.
Absolutely.
But, will this, from a teacher perspective in a mainstream school, do they have the time to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So every school to some extent is required, and it's very different on the special education side, they're required at least to an extent to collect data So having time, quote unquote, yes, they kind of do. But we think that this will decrease the amount of time that they're having to fill out paperwork. It's going to be way easier. So I think, the time savings will certainly outweigh or, be much better than it would if they're just doing this by paper. So there are laws that they have to comply with, but I think one of the issues is it's almost like this black box, right, of information that really only gets opened up in disaster or they have to prove something. So it's, and it's not like a seamless tool at all to get that information out. If that makes sense.
This reminds me, I like the idea, this reminds me a lot of, more generally, what's happening in a lot of healthcare with tools like this. ePharmix is a company that I'm an investor in, kind of has a similar, using text messaging and so forth. So two questions. One is this standardization of the feedback that you're, I guess, getting from educators. Is that I wasn't sure if that's okay. So I have a good friend whose son is autistic, and I asked him, he was like, no, it's fine. But do you get anything from that written report that may be more tailored for Max that you think you might lose if it's kind of the more standardized or routinized reporting that you're proposing with Max?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, something I have thought about. So, I should first caveat this by saying it's different from every school, from school to school,
Yeah.
right? So some people get nothing, some people
Yeah.
get more. We probably get more than most people do, I would say for certain. Yes, there is the risk of losing that, but I think if you can bake in kind of places where you can do other or notes or things where maybe they can take a picture or maybe even a little video, assuming we can make it HIPAA compliant. Like I think you can take that back into the product. So there's that aspect, right? The emotional, the touchy-feely
Yeah.
piece that you want to make sure you're baking into it.
Yeah.
But then, data really is important in the
Yeah.
world of autism, and tracking behavior is really important. And so we don't get any of that.
That's what my friend was saying. He would love this because it would give, he's an architect, so
Okay.
he was saying, I would love to see more data. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the value of the standardized things, so I can kind of see, here's day-to-day how his
Right.
son is doing, and what are the ups and downs, what triggers certain time of day, stuff like that, that the personalized stuff is great and it makes you feel good, but it also makes it harder to analyze.
It
So
does.
there's really that
Yeah.
balance that,
Yeah, and one piece I didn't touch on a lot, but again, most autistic or families that have autistic children, we're working with private behavior analysts outside of school, and so we need to cross that over with them, and they need to have that data too. And that's where it starts to get really powerful, is everybody has access to this tool. How can we work together as a team, right, to really improve the lives of these kids, rather than all this disparate information that's happening in different places, and it's happening in different ways, right? So.
Does your vision include an aggregation of the data, maybe depersonalized or de-identified?
Yeah.
Be able to understand what works and how potentially schools or regimens or protocols, or some are working, some are not? Because the big win is, beyond the dealing with individuals, which is clearly important on an aggregate basis, figuring out how to course the treatment to improve people, right?
Yes, the answer is yes. It's a discussion we've had. I don't think it's our initial core focus, just the data collection and how to use that yet. But if we're collecting data and we can use it and make it useful, then we absolutely should use it. We just don't know how or what that's going to look like yet.
Right.
Outside of course, we have to prove the concept, right?
Sure.
So we need, we need to have good metrics, but, large data collection and using that, we're not sure how we can use that yet.
But it affects the degree of personalization.
Yeah.
The more free form you have, the less you can aggregate it.
Yep, yeah, absolutely.
So is the solution more of a communication tool for the parent? Or is it streamlining, integrating, and I guess creating some collaboration on the IEP side?
It's both. So, and this is part of, what we'll deal with when we're selling into schools, is some parents might not even have a smartphone. And I think we said about 60% of parents in America have, don't have or 40% don't have smartphones. So there's not much we can do from a parent perspective there, but if we can show, hey, like this underfunded school is improving because we've just increased communication and data tracking and it's, we're showing improvements, then, I think that's still just as powerful as having parents have a peace of mind that they know what their children or child is doing. You know what I'm saying?
Sort of. So my sister's 52 and she has Williams syndrome, so it's not the same spectrum, but the issue both for her instructor, I think where she's 52, so it's pre-internet, is both as a child and then as a basically adult child.
Yep.
You have the same ecosystem, except no one can talk to one another.
Yep.
Not only that, but the teachers spend hours doing the paper forms that go into a file that nobody can read.
Right.
So the real value is actually getting the feedback by reducing the time and integrating the IEP side, then extending it through to adult kids, because they have the same services, just different provider.
Yep.
And then the parents kind of end up using that, but for the, so I guess the question is, for whom is the value? So if you told me as a school, you're doing this for the parents, I'd probably say, well, it's not worth my time to spend the money on it. Versus if I'm a parent, I'm gonna have a really hard time pulling teeth with the school to get them to integrate it.
Yeah.
Right, so I think the value proposition is muddied by having two focuses, would be the feedback I have.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback.
Do you have a preferred way of people contacting you? I had some friends in the therapy space that I've mentioned offhand, and they're like, that sounds like something I'm interested in.
Yeah, email.
Okay. Like your school email
Whatever.
address and all that?
Yeah, definitely.
So just to get around that 40% who don't have a smartphone, have you guys thought about putting, having web presence, like a web-based or a regular internet or iPad kind of thing? And secondly, are you gonna develop the app in-house or do the whole that by yourself? Have you thought about partnering with organizations like Google or Apple or pitching it to them where they have significant resources to be able to do that and take it,
Yeah,
implement
so
it even?
for the purposes of this, we wanted to see what it would cost just from a private perspective. How do we do this right? How do we make sure it's secure? And so we estimated costs of around $300,000 to get this started. That's from a private perspective. Yeah, of course, as a nonprofit, you have to be scrappy and save as much money as possible and bootstrap as much as possible. So that's absolutely something we would look into.
Can I ask you why does this have to be a nonprofit? And in some ways I was wondering, I can see certain ways, maybe if the nonprofit route helps you get something from Google.
Yeah.
But why not view this as another commercial startup? Might be actually easier to raise money.
Yeah.
And then let the investors make their, charitable contributions the way they
Yeah.
like. I just want to see more, what's your justification for
Sure.
that?
Yeah, so there's a few reasons. The first, again, like you said, is just from a missional perspective. If we're asking investors and we're saying this is going to be your 10, 20x on, your capital, at some point, do we have to cut costs or cut corners and get, so we're a little bit concerned about that. So, when we're taking money from private donors, they want to make sure that it's done right from a legal perspective, right? So that's a small aspect of it. The other aspect is just the market's not that big initially. So, if we have 540,000 autistic children, many of whom go to school, and then we cut that in half because a lot of those are underfunded, and those schools probably can't afford this product as well. It's a pretty small market compared to general education. So it's something we went back and forth on, but I think there are quite a few reasons for wanting to go the nonprofit.
And we believe that the donors are certainly there, and we've actually talked to some of them that are already investing in things like this and are personally connected to, they have children with autism, or like Micah said,
Yeah.
that this is a personal, emotional thing for them. So we believe, that $1 million lead donor funding is attainable.
Does that answer your?
Yeah.
Would it be possible to partner with a major academic research facility that has access to hundreds of millions of dollars in NIH funding and achieve your funding through that?
No, not at all. Yeah, of course. No, seriously, yeah.
Because what they need is the data that your app will provide.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot
100%.
about that
We have.
and from the data side, and, that's part of that partnering with institutions is, there might be a really good partnership there where we can both benefit.
mean, there's work that WashU is doing in this space. I mean, they would certainly be an organization we'd want to partner with through the Brown School and the medical school.
To continue on what Bart was saying with not going the nonprofit route, there's two points that you might want to consider. One is that there's a lot of health systems that have VC arms now. So if you could find one that had a VC arm and that also specialized in behavioral health, might be an ideal scenario.
Yeah.
Then the other is just other methods of monetization.
Yeah.
So instead of charging the end user or the school, maybe you could monetize it by facilitating drug trials to monitor their effectiveness in the school environment.
Yeah. That's definitely a realm and a possibility. It's actually something our mentor mentioned to us early on, so that's a great point.
Great. Thank you very much.